member of European Parliament from Lithuania, and I will try to manage this seminar. And this seminar is organized by a recently established network which we created here from European Parliament with a very important title, United for Ukraine, which now has more than 300 members of from different parliaments, from national parliaments, from European Parliament, and from Ukrainian Rada. And we have representatives from more than 30 different countries all over the world. And of course, our network is devoted to assist Ukraine in everything what is needed for Ukraine to win this war. This seminar is also organized in cooperation with another of our established webinars with the Friends of European Russia Forum. So, and I would like really to greet all the participants. Today we have quite many of members of different of our networks who joined our seminar. Today's seminar we are devoting to one of very important, political, geopolitical topics. You know what is the title? Europe's geopolitical choice to win the war to save Putin's face. That is now some kind of reality which we see in the debates, in public statements of the Western leaders, and which we are really concerned about. How things will develop. First of all, in the West, attitude towards this terrible war, and where really we as politicians, as experts who are also joining our networks, we need to see what is needed to be done. And today we have really brilliant speakers. First of all, very well-known experts like Andrius Aslund, who wrote a very important piece on that topic perhaps a few weeks or even months ago. Andrey Piontkovsky, very well-known also expert, and he wrote not even one piece on that topic about saving the face of Putin. Then we have Vasyl Pavlov, who is head of expert group from Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and also we have David Stulik, whom we know also very well as an expert from Czech Republic, from European Value Center for Security Policy. He is heading Eastern European program in that think tank, and of course, since Czechs are taking responsibility for all Europe, now we consider that David is responsible, for what will be an answer of European Union to this very important strategic question. What are we going to do? Are we going to support Ukraine to win the war, or we shall move again to business as usual, where the biggest concern will be how to save Putin's face? I will not elaborate too much on that, on that topic. My views perhaps. I see really that it would be very important for EU, and that is what we are trying to push here in the Parliament. I hope that next week in Strasbourg session we shall have maybe really deeper debate on all the geopolitics of this war and the consequences. I'm trying to push, to look the Western community and especially EU much more deeply into, our mistakes, which we in the West did during the last, decades, which perhaps, were in some way, the reason why Putin decided to go to this war. And in my view, really, one of the mistakes was that usually in the West, priority was given always to so-called dialogue with Putin, not, towards democracy in Russia. And that was, in some way, maybe Putin, got an impression that he can start the war. And again in the West, leaders will go for dialogue with Putin, nevertheless, and he will be not punished as it should be as it should be done. And in addition to that, I see some historical analogies which we perhaps need to remember. Since really what Putin regime now is doing, it reminds perhaps to everybody the period of Nazi Germany and Hitler, times. And here is very powerful Timothy Snyder piece on new fascism in Kremlin. And I'm always repeating that we need to look into that experience, how Nazi Germany, was transformed itself into democratic Germany, what we have now. And definitely, back in 1945, the West was not, looking how to save the face of Hitler. The outcome was total defeat of Nazi regime, and that was opening for new possibilities for Germany to transform itself into democracy, and to become a stable democracy, which is very important. What we have now. So the same with Russia. If we want really that authoritarian Russia would not stay as the biggest threat to European security, we need to see how we can assist Russia to transform itself from this new fascist regime into some kind of more European type democracy, and that should start from the same first step: military defeat and economical defeat of fascist regime in Russia. So that's my view. Maybe there are some different views, but that's my view, and I am trying to do our best, using this network also, in order to bring very clear messages to both to politicians in Europe and also to the people in Europe, which perhaps sometimes they have different opinions than some of their leaders, which would like to go back to business as usual with Putin. So I stop here, and now just technical remarks. We are live streamed on Facebook and YouTube channels. One stream on YouTube is with English interpretation, and one is with Russian interpretation. There is an interpretation. You can make a choice. You can give your questions to panel participants in chat section, as always. And now we shall start from, maybe I will ask our two experts who wrote good pieces on that topic, Andrius Aslund and Andrey Piontkovsky, to start. Then Vasyl Pavlov from Ukraine, will speak, and then David Stulik. And each of them have somewhere around of 7-10 minutes. And maybe I will start with Andrius, Andrius Aslund. Can you take the floor, and then we shall move to other speakers.
Thank you very much, Andrius, for your kind invitation and for all this work that you are doing for Ukraine in particular. I thought that I should simply start on this topic with President Biden's article in the New York Times yesterday. And as I read it, it's really an open letter to Vladimir Putin, since they don't talk directly any longer. It seems as if President Biden feels that he needs to use a newspaper article to communicate with Putin, because if for a Ukrainian to read this, it looks quite odd. And it's a very soft and defensive article, essentially about what the US is not going to do for Ukraine. And it doesn't start with the outrage about Russia's all illegal actions in Ukraine and the very war, but it starts the invasion Vladimir Putin thought would last days is now in its fourth month. So the outrage is missing. Then he moves quickly over to what is the aim in this war. And I quote, we want to see a democratic, independent, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine with the means to deter and defend itself against further aggression. So it does not clarify that Ukraine needs to get its full territory back. It doesn't clarify that at all. And then it continues, I quote, as President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has said, ultimately this war will only definitely end through diplomacy. Though it adds, every negotiation reflects the facts on the ground, and end of quote. So this seems to be saying we want to negotiate with you, Vladimir Putin, which is exactly what should not be said. Unfortunately, it comes a long bit about arms, but also their rather defensively. And then he comes back to apologize for his statement in Warsaw that he said that Putin cannot stay in power. So I quote here a long bit. The United States will not try to bring about his ouster in Moscow. So long as the United States or our allies are not attacked, we will not be directly engaged in this conflict, either by sending American troops to fight in Ukraine or by attacking Russian forces. We are not encouraging or enabling Ukraine to strike beyond its borders. And I should, end of that quote, I should add that Secretary of State Antony Blinken clarified that further yesterday, saying that the US had received assurances from Ukraine that Ukraine would not attack Russia with the new weapons that they have received. So what we are saying is Ukraine has to fight with an arm tied behind its back, so it can not attack the Russian bases where these weapons are shot from. So what we are seeing now is that this has become a long-distance artillery war, where Russia has far more long-distance artillery and missiles and also airplanes than Ukraine has. And much of this is operating from Russian bases. And Ukraine are, according to the United States, not supposed to have arms that can hit these. And if it gets some arms down up to 70 kilometers artillery, then they are not allowed to hit those bases. And then Biden also writes about diplomacy, and he writes here, quote, Ukraine's talks with Russia are not stalled because Ukraine has turned its back on diplomacy. They are stalled because Russia continues to wage a war to take control of as much of Ukraine as it can. End of quote. What kind of defensive language is this? President Putin has refused to talk to President Zelensky in any way or fashion after the meeting of the Normandy Group in Paris in December 2019. And here it should be a clear accusation against Putin. I see no reason to be so soft-spoken on Putin. And then we finally come to nuclear arms. And here Biden has two messages. The first is, I quote, we currently see no indication that Russia has intent to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And quote, next quote, let me be clear, any use of nuclear weapons in this conflict on any scale would be completely unacceptable to us as well as the rest of the world, and would entail severe consequences, end quote. what should have been said here is the standard US policy. If any country starts using nuclear arms, we will respond with nuclear arms. The only question is if it's a symmetric or asymmetric response. The symmetric response is the standard US attitude. So I can't understand why go on and try to talk to Putin through the New York Times and say we are not as bad as you think. This is the wrong point. Of course, the right thing was that the US now finally decided to send heavy artillery to Ukraine, substantially stronger missile systems than previously have been in question. This is an existential war between democracy and dictatorship, and as it is today, it's only the US that has the arms that can really change the course of a war. It's the US arms that will decide whether Ukraine wins or not. Ukraine has the better soldier and more motivated soldiers. Russia has still much more heavier artillery of many kinds. So that's the weakness that Ukraine has. The US can tilt the balance in favor of Ukraine. Nobody else seems to be able to do so. So this war is therefore very much in the hands of the US, and it cannot be a matter of saving Mr. Putin. Thank you.
Thanks, Anders, for a very clear message. Thanks a lot, as always. And now immediately I am turning to Andrey Piontkovsky. Andrey, really, again, we read your articles with a lot of interest, and we know that you have also very clear messages. So, Andrey, please, the floor is yours. You should unmute yourself. We still do not hear you. Please.
Andrey, you have to unmute.
Okay.
Okay. Now, yeah.
Okay, you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Anders has shifted the subject, the declared subject of our discussion. We're going to discuss the behavior of Europe, its collusion of France and Germany practically with Putin. But Anders concentrated on American position. He was right in his statement that Americans are to decide whether this war will win by Putin or by Ukraine. Emotionally, I agree with every his point of criticism of Biden's position. But we have no other United States. We have United States of current administration, and there are some positive elements in his latest statement and action. He understands that it's not war only on moral issues, it's a war of survival for the Western civilization. He understands it. The problem is that and the United States is the only great power which is able to support heroic Ukrainian army with the modern arms. The problem today is that what they're delivering is not enough. Today I'm more dissatisfied not with formulas in Biden essay in New York Times, but the list of arms delivered. This list was presented yesterday on the press conference in Pentagon by Deputy Minister. 4 HIMARS, it's nothing to change the course of battle. For the next 40 HIMARS, it's necessary, minimum necessary for make a strategic difference. So the action of France, of Ukraine, should concentrate now on convincing American administration. There are different persons inside administration, you know, there are dedicated friends of Ukraine like Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin. There are classical Putin verstanders like Mr. Sullivan, but I think the American engaged in this battle already politically, psychologically, diplomatically, and it can't lose. Ukraine, fall of Ukraine will become the fall of so-called free world, the fall of Western civilization. It will be much more. It's much more huge geopolitical catastrophe than withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I think the American leadership understands it. And the issue to press them to do more. But the situation in Europe is quite different, and I stick to our agenda for a while. There are two tendencies. One is the enormous wave of sympathy, solidarity with Ukrainian people, desire to help in any possible ways. And this tendency was emphasized by a recent global opinion poll, which showed that in all European countries, including Germany and France, this public support for Ukraine is enormous. But the official policy of France and Germany is not even appeasement, it's a collusion with Putin government. Take, for example, the so-called Italian peace plan. It's not Italian peace plan, it's plan of Macron and Scholz plan. They were shy to present it as a Germany and prefer to cover behind Mr. Draghi back. This plan of classical capitulation, this cessation of hostilities, and second point, bilateral talks between Russia and Ukraine about territories in questions. 20% of Ukrainian territory are declared in this Italian, France, German plan as territory in question. What is the reason of such behavior France and Germany leads? It's very simple. They are afraid of Ukrainian victory and correspondingly Putin's defeat, because this victory would change all geopolitical and security structure in Europe, and these two powers will lose their privileged, comfortable situation. They both, France and Germany, are presenting themselves for decades as states with special relationship with Moscow, as intermediaries, as absolutely necessary intermediaries in relationship of the West with Kremlin. And France behaves mostly of its, I would say, geopsychological ambitions. The famous French meme, Grandeur de France, demands from them usually distancing from the United States and playing games with Putin, with Kremlin. It's the strategy of the latest 70 years after defeat of France in the Second World War. They choose this role of to feel its so-called grandeur. Germans has more pragmatic in their relations with Putin. They don't see grandeur in Germany. They see enormous economic beneficial both for country and for the most prominent representative of political class. The story of the shameful story of Chancellor Schroeder is only tip of the iceberg. So this country are not interested in Ukrainian victory, and their behavior is quite logical. As for United States, I think they understand the seriousness of the problem, but underestimate the magnitude of the problem. The attitude of immediate neighbors of Ukraine and Russia are quite different. It was expressed dramatically by Slovakian Prime Minister at the latest Davos conference. He said that Ukrainians are dying now for us, because if they fall, the next butcher will be in Slovakia, in Poland, in both republics. This is, for this country, it's not just a matter of moral values. It's a matter of life or death. And our task now, task of the leaders of this country, the enormity of problem is understood deeply by Great Britain, by Poland, by both countries, by Slovakia, Czechia, Romania. This country, leaders of this country should go to Washington to explain to Mr. Biden and his administration what is going now. Mr. Biden likes to repeat the same phrase. We will fight for every inch of Article 5 territory. Wonderful. But he should understand that this fight for every inch Article 5 territory is going now on territory of Ukraine. Because if Ukraine fail, this fight will go to the west. And it's from pure military point, it's much easier to fight on the huge territory of Ukraine, which brilliant Ukrainian army, than on both territory on both republics, which are practically cut off from main NATO territory. This is absolutely evident military truth, and this understanding that we will fight for every inch of Article 5 territory should transform itself, that Western civilization should fight now for every inch of Ukrainian territory. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. Andrey. Thanks for your, again, very clear message. And now we're moving to Ukraine, you know. We have a speaker from Ukrainian side, Vasyl Pavlov, head of expert group, director of information policy from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So our very simple question, how Ukrainians are looking into that, you know, debate, especially in the western part of Europe, you know, on saving the face of, you know, of Putin and paying the price with Ukrainian territory. So, Mr. Vasily, please, floor is yours.
Добрый день. Во-первых, хотел бы выразить слова благодарности.
First, I would like to express our gratitude on behalf of the Ukrainian people for the support that our allies and our partners provide us. This support is pretty much essential for us. From what the previous colleague said, I would like to outline one thing. Currently, Ukraine is the shield of Europe, whether Europe understands it or not, but Ukraine is the shield of Europe. Consciously or unconsciously, majority of Ukrainians defend the European values. The values that might be unusual for some part of our population, but we already experience how important these values are. We feel how important the freedom of choice is. We feel the need to defend our interests and rights, and we feel support and understanding of Europeans. As Andrey Piontkovsky said, that if it's not us, then the war could move to Warsaw, Berlin, or maybe to Paris or Atlantic coast. So the problem of whether Ukraine withstands or not is a global European issue. As an historian, I can make some historical memories. Before the Second World War, the article was published in the UK that Ukraine was Europe's largest problem just before the war. And there was the article announced that the next world war will start for Ukraine or in Ukraine, and oil and territorial claims were mentioned in this article, as well as all other factors that are now in the European, being discussed in the European society. Ukraine repeatedly was the hostage of France's and Germany's politics because of the defeat in the First World War, as France was the ally of Russia. This is why the Ukraine's People's Republic in 1918 was not supported. It lost the support of Germany and it was not supported by France. And later in 1919, the military assistance from France resulted in the catastrophe of the Ukraine's People's Republic. Willingly or unwillingly, French people helped our enemies then. Later, it was the position of France which prevented the delegation of Ukraine's People's Republic to attend the peace conference in Versailles, where we could announce about our statehood and our capability to have our own state and to defend it. Despite this, we still continued for 2 more years for independent Ukraine after the First World War, and in this situation Poles appeared to be our allies. So I can again refer to Mr. Piontkovsky that Poles understand us very deeply, and Baltic states and their populations as well, because they have gone through what we are experiencing in differing times. The only difference being that some time ago they succeeded in defending their first independence, while we lost this first independence and we did not win in this war. And now, 100 years later, we have a chance to win it back. Usually it doesn't happen in history, but we succeeded regardless of what happened. And now we thank our partners who understand. And for example, if we speak about Russian shelling of Kiev, in the first days, several missiles fell in very important landmark locations. 2 missiles were on target, 500 meters away from the graves of Polish troops that were executed at the same time as in Katyn. Several days later, some missiles hit in the middle of Babin Yar Memorial, which is the symbol of Holocaust in Eastern Europe. And these things that became particularly important after Bucha and Irpin, and that are now happening in other occupied territories, are related with the facts that we understand that this war is not for grabbing territory, this war is for destroying us as a nation, and we as a nation have a right to defend ourselves. And we will not refuse this right. We are not going neither to give up our territory nor to lose our citizens. We do have losses, tremendous losses. Not a single European army has suffered such losses after 1945, which is not a secret to anyone. And I believe that Ukraine has paid its price of being in Europe, in the European Union, and in winter and spring of 2022, we can remember events of 15th century when Ukraine served as the shield between Muscovy and European states, and also 17th century and also the 20th century when Ukraine and the Ukrainian resistance movement, both military one as the Ukrainian uprising army, and also in peaceful times, the movement of Ukrainian dissidents, including religious movement, we have shown our willingness to be independent and autonomous, and our willingness to address our issues independently. And the fact that Putin or Russia, you name it, don't understand this is the difference between us. Our society is not homogeneous. Sometimes we might misunderstand each other. Sometimes we might dislike each other. But we feel that we're a single unit. And what we saw in the beginning of the war, this was a tremendous unity. Everyone stood up for Ukraine, including the regions which were never so much pro-Ukrainian, including Sumy and Chernihiv regions, where Russia's troops suffered huge losses, and there were footage of people stopping tanks with their bare hands, and when Ukrainian farmers used their tractors to remove Russian military equipment to stop the movement of these troops to Kiev, which showed how important freedom is for Ukraine. I will not manipulate events in Mariupol, but it is a horrific military crime, and Mariupol can join the Dresden, Berny, Coventry, and other symbols of military crimes of 20th century. The same applies to the resistance of Ukrainian soldiers, whether these were soldiers of armed forces or border guards, National Guard, or National Police, or Azov regiment. They were all fighting for the same cause of freedom. And it's symptomatic for me that not a single Ukrainian soldier left Azovstal as long as civilians were there. Civilians were evacuated, and Europe has to see that for armed forces of Ukraine, the value and primacy of human life and human freedom is supreme. So my message is that we are the shield of Europe, and for us this concept is very close and understandable, and we want Europe also to understand it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vasyl. What you are doing is something incredible.
Well, now I will again turn to English, and we shall ask David Stulik from Czech Republic, from European Value Center for Security Policy, very well-known expert, to take the floor. As I was saying before, Czech Republic from 1st of July is taking the presidency of the EU, and well, if the mistakes will be done by big, European countries, Czech Republic will have, that responsibility to change, wrong attitude. So please, David, floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrews, and thank you to all panelists and especially to the audience where I see a couple of friends of mine. Well, I was kind of asked to present the Czech position because the Czech Republic will assume the rotating presidency of the EU on the 1st of July. And here I will start with a simple phrase is that the Czech Republic, Czech government, as well as the Czech society are very well aware of this crucial role that we should play within the next half of a year. We should be a facilitator of discussions and different compromises, which puts even more kind of a pressure and responsibility on us. But in our, let's say, minds and hearts, we are absolutely on the side of Ukraine. And because we understand two things. First thing is there is no way that we would return to a business as usual after Russia openly attacked Ukraine on 24th of February. And also we are perfectly aware that this is a much broader fight of struggle. This is a fight, you know, for simple existence of liberal democracies. Because Russia is not the only, let's say, such an authoritarian country in the world, and there are others waiting and watching it. Here, I mean, for example, China. And this is a kind of a global clash. For example, yesterday our center organized a trilateral kind of an online discussion between the Czech experts and Taiwanese and Ukrainian experts. And we saw there lots of, let's say, parallels with the situation around Taiwan, for example. So if the West, liberal democracies, fail in this clash, then it would have profound consequences on the whole global order. And why I'm saying that, because here in Prague, in the Czech Republic, we have own historical experience and quite traumatic ones. The first one is linked to 1938, to München Agreement, treason of Czechoslovakia, and the second one is from 1968, when the Soviet Union occupied us. So we have quite a lot of direct experience with such a kind of a brutal forces, and we have a negative experience with these attempts to please the aggressors. So that what might now be happening to Ukraine, that is being pushed into these painful, so-called painful compromises to exchange the alleged peace for exchange of territories. This is very much similar to what we have experienced in 1938, and we all know what sort of consequences we face afterwards. So the appeasement of aggressor is a historical lesson that should not be forgotten by anybody who is calling for such a, let's say, dialogue or face-saving exercise of Mr. Putin. Because what would it mean? Putin's Russia will just get a timeout. They will get extra time to gather new forces, to get reinforcements, to get stronger again, and then attack again. And here, as it was said a couple of times earlier, the target is not only Ukraine, it's basically, you know, the next countries that are located to Russia. First, Baltic states, Poland, and even here in the Czech Republic, quite a large part of the population believes that we will be also targeted if Russia is not defeated in Ukraine. So we would face a new aggression if such a kind of a premature peace deal is being struck right now. And I perfectly remember it was February 2014 when I was working at the EU delegation in Kiev, when our officials, high-level officials, were arriving to Kiev and were telling the temporary leadership of Ukraine, acting President Turchinov, and asking him to refrain from military resistance to the illegal annexation of Crimea. And the worry of those European representatives was that this kind of a resistance could lead to the war. So they were kind of calling on Ukraine to appease the aggressor. And now we see the consequences of that appeasement. So this is another lesson learned that we should not forget. What such a kind of a premature peace deal or deal with Putin would also mean for Ukrainians. Again, I will speak here from the Czech perspective. It would be a moral frustration. Such a kind of a deal will break moral backbone of the Ukrainian society, of the Ukrainian political nation. And that kind of a breakage of the moral backbone could then last for decades. Again, the Czech experience perfectly shows it. What sort of a moral state of society we had here after the Soviet occupation in 1968. So we again can't let Ukrainians who are today bravely fighting and withstanding that brutal force to let them down, and we can't afford to lose their trust into their allies they have in Western Europe. And this will bring me to some sort of, let's say, a plan of the Czech presidency, because it has to change the priorities for the half of a year significantly. And the priority number one is obvious, it's Ukraine. And there are three sub-points. The first one is a candidate status. We see it as a part of our, let's say, support for Ukraine, that Ukraine and Ukrainians suffered a lot for that, for their Euro-Atlantic dream, for their dream to be part of the Euro-Atlantic community. And even granting that formal status would be as a huge and symbolic moral boost for their morale. The second thing, what the Czech Republic will bring forward is the assistance with reconstruction. Again, we want to kind of frame and design that reconstruction package in such a way that it would also help Ukraine to get prepared for the future EU membership. So that kind of reconstruction plan would have a double, let's say, label. It will be reconstruction and pre-accession package. And the third point, and an extremely important point, is the investigation and punishment of crimes committed by Russian Federation in Ukraine. And this is very much related to saving the face of Mr. Putin, because if these, let's say, tribunals, future tribunals, look into these crimes, then there is no way that the face of President Putin could be saved. Contrary, it would be a kind of a moral end of his rule if he is found guilty of all these crimes that Russian soldiers, Russian army committed in Ukraine. And the last point, it is not about saving the face of Putin. It is about saving, I mean, if we speak about saving the face of somebody, that would be saving a face of a contemporary Russia, because this is not Putin's war, this is Russia's war. And this brings me to the last thing, which is related to some of these questions that you sent us in advance. What is the ultimate goal of the EU? I think we don't have that ultimate goal formulated, but the countries like Baltic states, Central European countries have a clear kind of a vision here, and it's the ultimate defeat of contemporary Russia. And of course, there are some gloomy forecasts that it could lead to even a more authoritarian regime, that there will be even more bigger hardliners coming to force. But also, even if this is the most probable scenario, there is always a chance that the things could develop, even in Russia, in a more positive way. So we should also see the defeat of Russia as a sort of a hope, as a sort of a small light at the end of the tunnel that also could bring some, let's say, positive results in the future. So I will stop here.
Well, David, thanks a lot, as always, for your very precise and rational attitude. When you were naming your presidency goals, like candidate status, reconstruction of Marshall Plan for Ukraine and Tribunal, I saw, that, well, if you will achieve all those results, you will implement half of our, United for Ukraine agendas. We're ready to assist as much as we can. And again, I will repeat that we have this network, United for Ukraine. You can join everybody, members of Parliament One network, another network for experts, and that's how we can really try to do our best, really, to achieve that victory of Ukraine, which is also, very important for us, because this is a war not only of Ukraine but also of, ours war. So. Thanks a lot to all the speakers. And again, I would remind everybody who is participating in the discussion that you can put your questions on Q&A. I see some questions, and I will try really again to appeal to, first of all, to Anders and Andrey, with some very simple, picture. Well, we see really quite clear position of United States of America, which is, well, we can wish, even stronger one, but as perhaps Andrey Piontkovsky have said, everything will depend on US, real support to Ukraine with weapons delivery and things like that. And we hope that here will be it will be really delivered. Second, we see really from what Vasyl have said and what we know, from President Zelensky's statements, Ukraine will not go for any kind of territory compromises on their people. They will not sell, and that's again very clear. On EU side, as Andrei have spoken, really we have some issues with some leaders, French and German leaders. We know we have been to Berlin with our network recently, but from another side we see citizens, and as it was mentioned, really citizens globally and also in Europe and also in western part of Europe are very strongly supporting Ukraine. And that is, as we can see, from recent development, from recent regional elections in Germany, that is really bringing some kind of political outcomes. Social Democrats are going down in popularity. Now they are in third place. Christian Democrats are winning regional elections, and citizens are on the side of Ukraine. And perhaps, that is my question, maybe also for experts, how we can try to bring this citizens' power, back to political, scene in a more effective way. What I call, very famous words, "power to the people," from old nice songs. Because I see really that people can really be very influential factor in Europe, exactly in different, from different sides on really pushing their governments to support Ukraine. I would mention here one recent example from Lithuania. I know that Czechs are also doing the same, but we were surprised when one of our TV journalists, Andrius Kubilius, he put an initiative to collect, small donations from Lithuanians to buy a Bayraktar, and that took only 3 days for Lithuanians, to put 5 million, euros. And as we see from recent information, Turks are ready to produce that Bayraktar very quickly, and even with some lower price. So we have the question what to do with remaining money, I mean. But this is exactly showing that people are on the side of Ukraine with very strong political will. So my question is, one is maybe, our experts can elaborate a little bit how we can try to look into that perspective, how to bring this, power to the people into European political landscape. Second, my question would be on looking into this, citizens' power. And here is a question, perhaps I saw from Mrs. Gelashvili from Radio Free Europe from Georgia, about how long, in your prediction, how long this unity inside of Western world of people will stay? What would be your prediction? There are a lot of experts who are saying, well, the prices of energy will raise up, people will become very, unhappy, and maybe they will start to look much more for, social things, not to how to support Ukraine. So that is one question. How you see, if to look into, let's say, till the end of this year, how you see that situation? What will happen with the citizens? My second question is, can you predict, and I am looking to Andrey Piontkovsky and Andrius Aslund, developments in Russia itself? What's, for example, till the end of this year, can we predict anything? And how you see really the whole picture, citizens, Russia, and the war, what would be your view, how things can develop, especially during this year to the end of the year. So that would be my question, but you have plenty of other questions. So now I turn back to maybe we can start from again from Andrey Piontkovsky, then Anders, and David and Vasyl, to if you can look to different questions, that would be also good that you will pick them on your reactions, and you can react to each other, statements, so whatever. Let's continue our dialogue. Andrey, please. Sorry, still you are unmuted. I don't know what's. Unmute yourself. Still not. Still we see. Yeah, okay, now it's good.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Well, as for internal development inside Russia, it's a classical case of dictator suffering losses in external war. And certainly the victory, Ukraine victory is a battle for Kiev, undermined position of Putin inside his bunker. Or we watch his, I would say, pathetic performance during victory parade on May 9th. He tried to apologize before his colleagues. We were bound to make this decision. There were no other choice, but nevertheless it was the right decision, and so on. Certainly his authority has fallen, and the collective Putin, the ruling elite, they change the course of the war. If initial task was taking Kiev and dismissing the Ukrainian government, so-called regime change, now they're fighting for classical territorial expansion. And the future of Putin and his power depends on achievement of Ukrainian army. If Ukrainian army, supported by very significant deliveries of modern weaponry, go to counterattack, I think the chances of Putin to stay in power will decrease dramatically. And I use my opportunity to speak to emphasize once again the point which already was made by my friend Anders, that never in the history of human conflict the issue of this conflict depended on such simple factor. The issue of Ukrainian-Russian war, and consequently the fate of destiny of free vote and destiny of the vote, depends of very simple figure, the numbers of HIMARS or something like this delivered to Ukraine. Today it's 4. I say 4 or 40. This is be or not to be Ukrainian victory, be or not to be for fall of Putin regime.
Okay, thanks, Andrey. And Anders, can you now jump in?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll start with this question you posed to me and Andrey about developments in Russia. My view is very similar to Andrey's, but let me develop a bit. What we are seeing now, Putin's war in Ukraine is the worst war Russia has pursued since the Russia-Japanese War 1904-1905, which led to the revolution of 1905. That in itself should be a reason for him to go. My assessment of a decline in GDP in Russia this year is 15 to 20%, more because of the imports that are not coming, that will hit the economy much more later. Thirdly, we are seeing all kinds of rumors about Putin's health. It's quite obvious that he's not taken any public meeting after the 9th of May. There is discussion that he has two doubles, exactly like Saddam Hussein, which we now know that he had, and he appears with a swollen face and shaking hands, and is hardly appearing with people at all. If it is a meeting, a physical meeting, then it's one-on-one with somebody that he can trust would not spread it, like Lukashenko and a few Russian officials, or it is a meeting that would have taken place at any time. So Putin looks as if he's ill, and there are all kinds of rumors about it. And then fourthly, we are now seeing a quite straightforward fight between FSB, Foreign Service, and the military, where the GRU has taken over the intelligence in Ukraine. These are serious matters, and FSB has previously been the strongest organization, and now it is really under question. So I would be surprised if Putin stays in power at the end of this year. He has managed many times before, but now we have four big reasons for him to fall. I would like to touch up on Rebecca Harm's question in the point in the chat on the Minsk agreements. I think that they changed nature. When they were agreed upon first, it was mainly that France and Germany helped Ukraine stop the Russian attacks. And in 2014, 2015. I think that Chancellor Hollande did a very good job in it, and Macron has not really changed it to the opposite, so that now it has been a matter of mediating between Russia and Ukraine, as it was until last spring. And Germany and France lost their way, and that includes Angela Merkel, who I think had a very clear attitude in the beginning to stop it. And I think this contributes to the confusion in the French and German leadership that Rebecca Harms is pointing out. Also, I see a question from Vitautas Danilevichus, if Belarus could assist with rail transportation from Ukraine to Klaipeda with grain. No. What Lukashenko demands is that the West should abolish its sanctions on potash exports from Belarus. That will not happen. And Lukashenko has always proven himself completely unreliable. So he's even more unreliable than Putin. So there's no reason to make any agreement with Lukashenko, because he never sticks to an agreement. So I think that this is completely out of question. And really the only proper solution is to open up Odessa and Odessa's port, and this requires armed support, either with a Navy convoy, which would be the fastest, or that Ukraine gets long distance anti-ship weapons, as we harpoons and others, to be able to take out enough of Russian Black Sea Navy. And we're seeing time and time again that the US is putting limits to itself. We were a group here in Washington pushing for a no-fly zone. early on, nothing doing, too dangerous. It could be a confrontation with Russian airplanes. The same when it comes to open up the Black Sea to free navigation. Since these are international waters, no, we are afraid of hitting Russian ships. The same with MiG-29 from Poland to Ukraine, nothing doing. But let me end with a point about what has happened in the European Union. Germany and France used to be the anchor. Now Germany and France have become the dissidents. To some extent with Italy, but not much, Austria a lot, and Hungary is really on the extreme. While the country that I think has benefited the most within the European Union, improving its standing, is Poland. And of course, the three Baltic states have done extremely well all the time, but they were in a good position. The Czech Republic, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania. I think Bulgaria under the new government all look very good. I think also that the Nordic countries look quite decent. And this is really quite a change within the European Union. And where will it lead? Andrei discussed this a bit in the beginning. Will it mean that the EU becomes more split and therefore less effective? That's a danger. Or does it mean that Europe will become more balanced and that it will become therefore stronger? For the first time, a truly multilateral community, which is of course what we all hope, but in this case I think that we are just analysts and can hope for the best. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Anders. I see that really we have new and new topics to discuss, in our community, and now really this point, about the future of European Union and the balances inside of European Union, and how much this war can bring some kind of new possibility or new power, new influence for Eastern and Central Europe inside of EU. That's I think very important topic now, and we can plan to discuss. Now, really, I would maybe ask David. Here is a very clear question from Nino Galashvili, Radio Free Europe from Georgia, on candidate status and what Czech Republic is going to do. We here in the European Parliament, exactly today, this morning, we had a discussion, and I am plenty of concerns that things can, with the French presidency and our views that the last European Council meeting at the end of June 27th, 24th would bring positive, outcome, positive decisions on candidate status. I'm not so sure that it will happen, since again, we see some capitals hesitating. I called there is that in the EU among institutions there is this mysterious council meetings where you never can predict what they are going to decide, and they are not responsible for to what I would call to European people. Maybe prime ministers are responsible to the government, to their national parliaments, but I see that as really problematic situation now. So maybe you can spend some time how you see the whole situation and what Czech Republic is going to do if things will go into your responsibility period. And then maybe I'm looking that there is question also on from one of our it's a question from Sonia Koshkina on what is happening with Russian society. Maybe Andrei can take that. This is a question from Sonia, who is from Ukraine but now in Czech Republic. So, but nevertheless, can you elaborate a little bit more on Russian developments? And then I will bring back, maybe both Anders and Andrei on U.S. perspective. Magdalena is asking why Biden was so weak in his statements, and I would add an additional question: what midterm elections can bring? How we shall see, what developments in U.S., after midterm elections. So maybe you can elaborate. And then Vasyl will conclude our discussions. I see that time is running. So now I am turning back to first of all, to David on candidate status.
Right, and I also see a question from Rebecca Harms, maybe that the decision to grant candidate status to be submitted to presidency. Look, I mean, it's I would say priority number one, maybe a bit kind of very high, ambitious priority to have that decision on candidate status right now at the June European Council, because the window of opportunity is still quite widely opened, and it's because of the, I would say, widespread public support for Ukraine. So even those politicians from countries that are more hesitant to grant candidate status right now, they are under pressure of their public opinion. And with the growing economic and social difficulties that we all are going to face in the second half of the year, that window of opportunity and priorities of both the society and their governments might be shifting away. So that's why we believe we should act, we should respond rapidly right now because of this historical opportunity. And answering Nino's question, well, we believe that we are indeed in a kind of a historical moment. So we should kind of abstract from those technocratic, let's say, requirements and conditions. But at the same time, for granting a candidate status, you just need the opinion of the European Commission, which needs to be endorsed by the member states. So this is not accession, let's say, decision, which would and should be based on these Copenhagen criteria. And then the process of granting, for example, Ukraine the membership perspective of giving it membership, let's say, confirmation, should be seen in the line also, for example, with Western Balkan countries that are in the same process. And then it should be indeed a merit-based exercise, where all these countries would be assessed by the European Commission against the Copenhagen criteria, whether they do fulfill these requirements, conditions for becoming a member. Now we are speaking only about candidate status. And we have some countries like Turkey that are waiting for that membership decision for quite a long time, and they are still for decades a candidate country. But as I said earlier, it's very important because of the symbolic meaning to show to Ukrainians that the EU is open towards them. It would send a very strong moral signal of support.
Thanks a lot, really. Thanks a lot, David. Really, we see now as crucial priority for our network, to push for candidate status. So we shall do our utmost to achieve that outcome. Of course, we hope that it will be done really during French presidency, but at least we have, the hope that if French will fail, then Czechs will deliver. Now, maybe Andrei, on this, question on what is happening with Russian people who are supporting the war, as some, opinion polls are showing, and things like that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, may I concentrate on other question you mentioned, addressed to me about reasons of President Biden so-called weakness. I would remind you that we were witnessing a dramatic internal political struggle on the issue of Russian-Ukrainian war in the United States. Last July, you remember last July summit in Geneva. It was catastrophic summit for Biden and a successful summit for Putin, because Putin somehow made his vis-a-vis to repeat his narrative. Biden said in Geneva to President Zelensky, fulfill Minsk agreements, as my friends Merkel, Sarkozy, Macron and Putin recommend to you. It was Pyrrhine victory for Putin because Biden was met in Washington on the next day by headlines of newspapers and TV channel. Putin got from Biden everything he wanted. And it was not Fox News, it was CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, organs of Democratic Party. So enormous political pressure worked in the United States. The brilliant performance of Ukrainian diplomacy, all these things make change the official policy of administration. I already mentioned that in administration they are dedicated to Putin first-stainers. I named them. This is Sullivan, this is John Kerry, and this is former American ambassador Burns. Now Biden is firmly under influence of Ukrainian friends Sullivan and Austin. But this residual pressure is still there. And I am sure that before Biden made his remark about help to Ukraine on Monday, all weekend he was called by Macron, by Draghi, by Scholz, by Kissinger, by Sullivan, by Burns, maybe by former President Obama, who all of them convinced him not to deliver these famous MLRS systems to Ukraine. So our problems with Biden administration are not of qualitative but of quantitative character. We should convince him to send more numbers of HIMARS, Patriots, and other anti-ship missiles besides the issue of this war. As for opinion polls in Russia, opinion polls in authoritarian states does not reflect anything. But nevertheless, I think my feeling from talks with Russians, with watching Russian media is maybe about 50 or 60% of Russian population infected by TV propaganda more or less supports the so-called special operation. This number, as an attitude inside Putin bunker, will change with the course of war. Everything Russian factors in Russia are completely dependent on course of battle in Ukraine, and course of battle in Ukraine is completely dependent of magnitude of American modern weaponry deliveries.
Thanks a lot, Andrey. Thanks a lot. Now I will turn to Anders on maybe American developments, and I will then pick a little bit on how I see Russian people, situation and what can we expect a little bit more, because that question which Sonia asked, she's really looking for broader discussion. That is, of course, not the purpose of this discussion, but I will elaborate a little bit later. Now, Anders, can you? Well, I think you can elaborate a little bit, whatever you want. But again, I am looking to midterm elections. You know much better. What expect Europeans? We don't understand that. Political, how to say, American political logic so well as you know.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrius. I think that this looks worrisome. There is one big force who is against Ukraine in the US today, and that's Donald Trump. And he agitates through his channels. One is Tucker Carlson on Fox News, who's the most popular anchor on cable television, and he normally poses questions: why do we support Ukraine? And then specifying in various regards, and he's much and why don't we support Russia instead? This is his presentation, and Trump has one strong political action group in Washington that is called the Heritage Foundation, which is now agitating full out in favor of Russia and against Ukraine. And in the Congress, the strongest representatives against Ukraine are a few Republicans who are Trumpists, and they are increasing. So in the last out of 16 House votes on Ukrainian matters, 57 congressmen were against, and they are increasing Ukraine, and they are increasing all the time. It's still just a quarter of the Republican congressmen, no Democrats at all. But Trump is driving this issue all the time, well, not very loudly, very much so. In the Senate, Rand Paul held up the $40 billion for Ukraine with procedural complaints, and he managed to get 11 senators, all Trumpists. Most of them were not sanctioned by Russia, unlike me, for example, declared persona non grata among these 963 US citizens. So this is the danger, and they are becoming stronger. The group that is against Ukraine, and there's a big outcry now over arms, where the Republicans are very strongly in favor of arms. You must be in favor of assault rifles today if you are a Republican, and this has made it much more difficult to do something bipartisan. And until now, Ukraine has been one of the rare bipartisan issues in the Congress. It's quite possible that nothing can be done in a bipartisan fashion. So most of the traditional Republicans so far, Mike McCall in particular, in the congressman, and Rob Portman in the Senate, they are overbidding the Democrats. So when Biden asked for $33 billion for Ukraine, very much with Republican support, it came up to $40 billion. I doubt they will roll in any longer, and therefore I think that the midterm elections can be quite troublesome, but much here depends on how well the Trump candidate will be doing. They lost quite badly in Georgia in the primary elections for the state level, but this is what one really needs them to keep an eye on. I wanted to respond to Eva Christoph's question about Greece and Cyprus and Malta. I think that the most notable thing is that Greece and Cyprus no longer appear as pro-Russian voices within the European Union, and I will very much emphasize the new Greek government, well, not so new any longer, but for 2-3 years, which has a completely different attitude to Russia. So Greece is now on the right side, and Cyprus really turned because of its financial crisis in 2013, which was very much contributed to by dirty Russian money in Cyprus, and they don't want to see that again. Malta is a bit on the side and not playing much of a role when it comes to shipping. Well, about 1/4 of all merchant ships in the world are owned by companies whose ultimate owners have a Greek name. So this is, you have big commercial interest there. Want to touch more on Sonia Koshkina's question about what will happen in Russia after Putin. Well, we all depend on our own personal experiences and performing matters. I think that when Putin loses power or dies, that the power is likely to fall into the hands of a Security Council, and we'll see a situation as in August 91, where the Security Council has no authority and it will not be able to hold the power. So I think that power will fall into the street, and I see only one politician apart from Putin today in Russia, that's Alexei Navalny. So he could play the role that Boris Yeltsin did in 91 if he's out of prison and alive. Otherwise, the power is likely to fall into the street, and we will see who picks it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Anders. Really, before I will give the floor final, comment to Vasyl, I would like just few words on what you ended to Sonia question on Russian people and what can happen. Definitely, this is another topic which we perhaps will have a possibility to discuss in our forums, either United for Ukraine or European Russia, Friends of European Russia Forum. But I see two things which really is very important also for EU leaders to understand. First of all, of course, we need to speak in a very clear way that authoritarian Russia with Kremlin regime, which became a fascist regime, is the biggest danger to European security. Of course, we see also that Russian people, we can discuss about the numbers, but Russian people are supporting what Putin is doing now. Some people, some Europeans, because of that, they are very much, surprised, and they're saying, well, it means that Russia has no future. Russia will never become a democracy. Again and again, I'm repeating the same, examples. Let's remember Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan during Second World War. Both people of Nazi Germany and Japanese people were supporting what their leaders were doing with all aggressions and so on and so on. So that is unfortunate that happens, brainwash or whatever, you can name it, makes people, to do what they do during those times to support, aggression, to support the regime. But as we can see now from German example, for example, Germany is a democratic country. We can criticize, chancellor and so on, but it's a democracy. And the question is how it went through, how it changed. And that is where, the answer comes very simple. The first step was really defeat, military defeat, of Nazi Germany. What is now needed really, to achieve the same when we're talking how to help Russian people to get rid of that fascist regime, which they have. Second steps were, look back to the history. We shall see. Second step was Nuremberg process, Nuremberg Tribunal, which we are now talking about tribunal, on the crime of aggression, against Putin. That is what we need to do. And then, support to Adenauer democracy in Germany and Marshall Plan for German democracy to be stabilized. Everything what we need to have in mind when we're looking also, to the future of Russia, which definitely we want to see as a democratic country and not staying as a biggest threat to all European security, starting from Ukraine. That's our long-term vision. How we shall manage to do it, we shall see. But now everything depends on Ukraine and our support to Ukraine. So, and that is why I'm giving the final word to Vasyl. Please conclude our discussion. We still do not hear you.
Сейчас слышно?
Do you copy me?
Я думаю, что черту под нашим разговором
I believe we will wrap up by seeing what the Ukrainian military will do at the fight. So that will be the final wrap up. Let me express my opinion and explain whether Putin is Russia and whether Russia is Putin. I believe that these are equivalents, and the proof is the Soviet Union after the death of Stalin. For example, all famous aggressions after the Second World War, it was not the Soviet Union of Stalin, but the Soviet Union of Budapest 68, Khrushchev's USSR, Prague 68, under Brezhnev, dying Brezhnev is Afghanistan in 1979. The same is about Russia. We have Yeltsin's Russia with the first Chechenian war, Russia with weak Putin in the second Chechenian war, then aggression in Georgia. It was also Russia with Putin. And today we can see the Russian society, especially what we can see, what we can hear from the wiretapped conversations between the military and their family members, mothers and wives and children. We can see that this is the society which is in the paradigm of violence. Therefore, Russia should clear it out by itself if we say that we are all democratic states. Therefore, no matter how we see them, they can decide it by themselves, either through elections or coup or revolution. This will depend on them. Ukraine has proven its right to be in Europe because in 20 years of Putin, we changed 4 presidents. All presidents were replaced through democracy, irrespective of what some parts of the society liked it or not. Today, on the side of Ukraine, we can see the representatives of practically all political parties and the views for whom the paradigm of European values and sovereignty of Ukraine are prevailing. Speaking of Russia, I hope that Russia, citing Russian poet Pushkin, will wake up and on the debris of Imperia will be born again. So next step is yours. We have made our step, and I believe in our military force, in our victory, and then we'll see. Vasyl, we also believe in it, and we are thankful to your military and to your leadership. I believe that this is not only the protection of Europe from the evil that is unfortunately in the Kremlin, but this is also the example of the leadership that is very lacking in the European continent. Therefore, thank you very much indeed.
To thank everybody. We had really very interesting and very important discussion. Our views are clear, and definitely, I think that we need to take care not about face saving of Putin, but we need to take care about face saving of European Union, first of all, the West, because that is a litmus test to the West, how are we able, to support Ukraine in order to win this war, which is really the war not only against Ukraine, it's the war against all what is important for the whole Western democracy world. So again, I would like to thank, first of all, panelists and also all those who joined our discussion. As I said before, you can join our networks, United for Ukraine, either parliamentarian network or network of experts, and also, we shall continue with our webinars, public ones, with our activities, lobbying and so on, and also, with activities of our another community, friends of European Russia, because things which are happening on the European continent really are very important. So thanks a lot again, and good luck now, and all the best to our friends in Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
Спасибо. Goodbye.